So we are going to officially start, and I'm going to introduce my next guest. And I will tell you this about my next guest. If you have not ever, or if you can't say that you've ever seen a miracle, then I'm telling you that tonight, if you're live in the room, you are seeing a living, breathing miracle, a work of God that we should not be having this conversation. Without God in the equation, tonight's conversation would not be happening. And so tonight we get to see a miracle live, and if you're listening online, you get to hear a miracle. And so I want to introduce my next guest. His name is Michael Berrian Jr. He is from Macon, Georgia, and he came down all the way 5 hours, right, to have this conversation. So would you say hello and welcome, Michael? First impression of Tampa. Was this your first time, or is this your first time?
Yes.
What do you think?
I love it.
Yeah?
I want to move down here.
Yeah, you moved down here. We'll welcome you. We got him a spot by the water, and so you should spend like 2 days and go see other things because it's easy to fall in love next to the water. So it's good. It's good to have you. We are in Tampa, which to me is a different city. I am a West Coast guy who came from a small little rural spot outside of Portland, Oregon, and I was introduced to Macon, Georgia by friends from Tampa who now live in Macon, Georgia, but I had never heard of your city. I had no idea what Macon, Georgia was like. And when Jerome and I got there the first time, when our family went there, we were introduced to a city that is equal parts beautiful and broken. And the broken part is broken like I had never seen before. In Oregon, we have this place east of the east side of Portland used to be rough. There was these certain parts of the city that were rough. There is no place in Portland, Oregon that I would say compares to some of the stuff that I saw in Macon. And there's a particular neighborhood called Pleasant Hill that has a reputation for, back in the day, it was kind of nice. I heard from people that was great. But your experience in Pleasant Hill was different. So would you introduce us to Pleasant Hill, to your neighborhood, and to Macon, Georgia?
Okay. Well, I grew up in a neighborhood called Pleasant Hill. And as a young child growing up in the neighborhood, just very influenced by what was going on around me, which was mostly criminal activity. So at a certain point of age, growing into a teenager, just fell in love with that because that's all I saw, all I knew, all that was around me, and I just instantly got involved in a whole lot of things. Pleasant Hill was maybe considered one of the most drug-infested areas in Macon, Georgia. A lot of drug dealers, a lot of addicts, different things like that. I remember being in elementary school, and a guy that I knew and I grew up with, was selling weed, and he was only 5th, 6th grade. And normally you would hear about that in high school, but it started very early in my neighborhood, where people would get out and sell drugs, young boys, gang affiliated, from Crips to Bloods, Gangster Disciples. And we have a gang it's a Macon gang that was made up. It's called the Mafia. But just being involved with so many things like that, breaking and entering, breaking in cars, different stuff, and talking about at the level of, elementary kids where, you're supposed to be learning about, elementary type things, and we're being taught how to be gangsters, at a very young age in the neighborhood that I grew up in. Yeah. And, but Pleasant Hill was, as you said, very beautiful, but it became something else based on people that was involved around, and older heads teaching young people, how to commit crimes, robbery, selling drugs. I remember the first time I sold crack cocaine, it was from somebody that was older than me that gave me a deal. Instead of charging me full price, he charged me, a percentage of the price that I can have my own, sack to sell, and I began selling drugs from him, and older people that introduced me into the gang life, and I started to be gang affiliated because somebody older, in my neighborhood put me on to that kind of stuff.
And when we were driving through those neighborhoods, it is beautiful. The architecture and some of the houses, you really drive down the streets and some of the houses are kind of built and there's steps up to them and there's
Right.
porches. And as we were going through some of those neighborhoods, there was a presence of older guys just hanging out on porches. And
Right.
I can imagine as a young guy that is what you're looking up to that. Your mom was doing her best
Yeah.
it sounds like your mom was great and was welcoming kids into your home and doing Bible studies and
Right.
doing her best to try to keep you out of that.
Yeah. She tried.
Yeah. At what age did you kind of choose to lean out from everything that your mom had tried to do?
It was about age of 13, 14 when I, started smoking weed, got introduced to smoking from my older cousin. When I started smoking weed, around the time I got expelled from middle school, I got kicked out of middle school. Supposed to have 15 write-ups. They spared me, blessed me. I had 57 write-ups, and I guess they got tired of writing me up and they expelled me from school.
It's just a little bit over.
Yeah. And they sent me to alternative school, and for some reason, people think that when you take all the city's bad kids and put them in one place, that we're just going to turn out better. But,
Great idea.
I learned more criminal stuff. I got involved, with more things, because of all the people I was around,
Yeah.
Because, in alternative school, all the bad kids there, and I learned more stuff. And thinking about today, a lot of kids that I was with in alternative school, either dead, in jail, they've been to prison, or they still out there living some kind of life. Only a few changed their life, and I was blessed to be one of those that, got the U-turn, but it don't happen often at all.
Well, we'll get into that in just a second. Was your dad around at this 13, 14 age?
No, he wasn't. I hadn't, seen him in a while. He would pop up every now and then. Him and my mom was not the best of friends, and my thing, from my understanding from his end, my mom didn't want him around, so he stopped making effort, at some point. And around this time, I believe my dad was a alcoholic. It was from woman to woman, that type of stuff. And, I hated him for that, but I fell in love with other men that did that, as far as, I looked up to womanizers and drug dealers and the guys that was able to get the big car with the big rims on it. I wanted to be like those guys. But my dad doing it and it causing him not to be in my life, I disliked him. So,
Yeah.
He wasn't around much.
Yeah. So you're 14, mom is trying her best to keep you, and you keep leaning out, going the other way.
Yeah.
You've got your friends, your little crew that you were rolling around with, and you were doing all the stuff you were doing, but there was really a turning point that you talk about in your book. Michael's written a great book that's really just your story. It's called From a Convert to a Convict to a Convert.
Yes.
And we've got one copy we're going to give away, but I'll tell you how to find that on Amazon. But tell us about that kind of defining moment that ended up sending you to prison, ultimately.
Yeah. When I turned 14, one day walking from school, I was introduced to this young guy that became my best friend. His name, we call him Pee-wee. His real name was Prince. And I just fell in love with him, man. And me and him was like best of friends. And another guy who moved to my neighborhood that I went to alternative school with. And all three of us, we became best of friends. And Pee-wee's family, they was a part of Gangster Disciples. And they introduced me to the lifestyle of that, even down to his mom, used to be representing all his sisters, his brother, we call him OG Bobby, but he was a Gangster Disciple. And I got involved with that, lifestyle. And then I began to, sell drugs and do all that. And one day, my cousin, he fronted me some drugs to sell for him. And he was real smart for us, if you want to be smart as a criminal. He would put me on the block with big old, rocks that was bigger than everybody else's, but we charged the same price for it, so that everybody would come to me. And just me being young and not real educated, I messed up the money. And my effort to try to get my cousin his money back and my friends, we decided that we was going to commit a robbery. And committed a robbery, committed another robbery, and committed another robbery, and we ended up getting caught. And in the midst of that, we vowed, you know, I talk about that Proverbs 1 in the book where, you know, we vowed that we wouldn't go home that night until we robbed somebody. And we literally stayed out half of the night, you know, wee hours of the morning until we robbed somebody. Then we went home, you know. And when we would make vows like that, we would do what we said we would do until it was done, you know. And
This is one of those things that in your book I loved, just getting the perspective. These are kids, young people. And you guys' conversation was, we're going to get some money.
right,
And you were, he just tells the story from a perspective where, as an outsider, you go, well, how can something like that happen? But he tells the story from your perspective. You go, how could you not do that? I needed money. I needed to solve this problem. So we made a plan. And then you saw this victim, and you go, well, how does somebody end up in the wrong place at the wrong time? Your description of the victim is they just parked their car and just walked by, and you pounced. You said you pounced like, I don't know, lions on a gazelle. Yeah, you were just waiting. That happened. That led to the 2 other robberies, right?
right.
And then it caught up to you.
Yeah, and just random people, no plan, just first one that come, you know. No real plan about getting any money or anything, just wanted to do something. And
Were you conscious at the time? I mean, I pick it up a little bit in the book that there was some fear in you, there was some desire. You didn't want to necessarily go down that road, but you felt like you didn't have a choice?
Yeah, I didn't want to do it, but because of my friends and me wanting to be down and wanting to be gangster, I went along with it. And I had enough influence. As the oldest, I was 16. My co-defendants were 15 and 14. As the oldest, if I would have said, let's not do this, they would have listened to me. But instead, you know, when I was asked to do it, I went along with it and did it. And that was a 4th person with us that didn't go to prison with us because he made the right decision. And right before we robbed, he said he had to go home. He left. So when we went to prison, he was on the streets. And I think about that all the time. That could have, you know, that should have been me saying, you know, I got to go, you know, but.
Was it the first person that you robbed? I mean, Miracle 1 is just, your mom was with you. She's praying for you. So God had not left you alone. He had given you this amazing mom that's in your life, and he had been with you. I think that you could count the miracles, but was it the first person that you robbed was carrying a gun and a toll, or it was the second?
I can't remember the first
one.
First person we robbed. We found out, you know, later that he had a gun in a holster. And he told the police officer, the only reason he didn't shoot because he knew we was kids. Because he could have just shot in the crowd. He would have hit one of us. You know, could have been me, could have been one of my friends. Either way, I would have been affected, you know, and spared us, yeah.
So that night, unbeknownst to Michael, he's a kid, goes up to rob somebody who's carrying a gun, decides not to shoot him because he's a kid. God shows you, I mean, just, there's an amazing story there. Then you enter a house, everybody else bolts. I think this is the 3rd time.
Yeah, this is the 3rd
Everybody
time.
else leaves,
Right.
and you come face to face with the homeowner.
Right.
And they just let you walk out.
Yeah. Just let me get away. No question. You asked me, do I want to leave? I said yes. They moved out of the way and let me go. Could have held me there, you know. But it was amazing how all that took place, you know. And I'm just grateful. You know, it could have been worse. Even when the police came to pick us up, it was pointing these big guns in our face and all this. And, you know, we hear so many stories now about how police shoot people. And coming to my neighborhood, you know, people are afraid of the police for that reason. And, you know, the mission is protect and serve, but in our eyes, you know, we don't trust the police for several reasons. But police is good, you know. A lot of them are good. You know, you do have those few that are not, but for the most part, the police are needed and they are good. Yeah. You know.
There's some irony there to now where you're going to work, so we'll get to that.
Right.
But so you do this, and are you 16 years old when you are convicted?
Right.
You plead
16.
guilty.
Yeah, 16.
And this is an amazing program in Georgia. What's the program called
It's
that
called,
allowed you?
First Offender Act.
Tell
Yeah.
us about the First Offender Act and what was presented to you.
What was presented to me in my plea bargain, they was offering me 3 counts of armed robbery and a count of kidnapping. They charged me with 4 felonies. 16 years old, all of us got charged as adults. A part of my plea bargain was I can accept the First Offender Act, and it's not a guilty, not guilty plea. It's first offender, your first time, and they will give you time, and if you do your time, stay out of trouble, get off probation, they'll expunge your record, clear it like it never happened. You can have a future, you know. You don't have to worry about anybody pulling it up, and, you know, because that's the most thing. When people get out of prison, their life is kind of messed up because of their record. You know, with the First Offender Act, they clear your record. And
it's amazing.
they expunge it, you know, so.
So you said yes?
Yeah, I said yes to that. And,
Said yes to that, but there was some condition that if
Yeah.
you violated the
Yeah,
agreement.
if I violated, I would be taken back to court, recharged, resentenced, and they would probably give me the max, which I was facing about 50 years for all my charges, but they would probably give me 1 count, and I probably would at least have to do 15 years. Do 15, serve 10. 10 in and 5 on paper, because that's what my co-defendants had.
Okay, so that we don't lose that, imagine 16 years old, the best deal presented is what you took, which we'll talk about what you actually were, the time that you were able to do, but what you're facing is, if I mess up again, do anything to violate that agreement, then I'm going to be recharged and at minimum 10 years,
Right.
10 years in prison. So I would now be 26 years old coming out, and you would have your felony. But
Right.
that didn't happen. You said yes, and you went in.
Yeah.
And what was your actual sentence for?
10 years served 4. I had
So
to
you
do
were sentenced
4,
to 10,
10 years.
allowed
And I
to
had
do
to do
4.
4, incarcerated, 6 on papers. I ended up only doing 3 years and 1 month, and I was released on parole earlier than I was supposed to be, and ankle monitor. And then I got off parole, went to probation, did probation, paid my restitution fines, community service, did right, you know, and they freed me in 2012, 10 years.
Before we get in, the ankle monitor story, I want to talk about that a little bit because I see it as another just amazing work of God, but not the actual ankle monitor, but what happened. But going in, you're 16 years old and you're going to jail. And at 16, you went to the youth facility, but they transferred you because you were charged as an adult. You went
Right.
to prison. And you spent 1,000 days, 1,100 days, something like that,
Right,
in prison.
right.
We don't have, I don't know what that's like. Let us into your mind as you are about to go to prison. I mean, where are you at when that's happening?
Yeah, I was, you know, inwardly, I was afraid because of stuff I've seen on TV, stuff I've heard about prison, you know. Main thing was just about being raped or something like that. And being young, being around adults, you know, that will be predators to you. And so as a juvenile, you know, you act tough. You know, I'm in a juvenile, getting in a whole lot of trouble and trying to carry this, you know, this tough guy. But on the inside, you know, I was very afraid. You know, I knew I had to go to prison after I got my time. I knew I was going, and I just tried to, you know, condition my mind for it. And that was a glimpse of hope I had that I wouldn't go when I got to the YDC, and I turned 17, and they didn't come pick me up. I was like, they may let me do my 4 years in the YDC, that'd be good. But 4 days after my 17th birthday, the prison bus came, picked me up, shackled me down, you know, and said, what they say? Welcome to the big boys, you know. Congratulations. And they put me on the bus, sat me in the front, shipped me 2 hours north, and hid me somewhere.
Was God a part of your world at this point?
No.
Distant? Were you
No, I
conscious of?
I consider myself a Christian, but I wasn't living accordingly, the way I was raised. So I prayed, I had Bible scriptures I would read. I would even talk about God, but, I wasn't into God like that, Even when I went to prison, I didn't go to church for maybe like a whole year. And when I did, it was for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Take us into that moment in the story. I mean, there's so much that happened within those 1,100 days, but where did you talk about, and we'll get to your new album that's coming out, where you talk about being the one.
Right.
And the story that God goes after the one and he kept coming after you. Take us into the moment in prison where he found you, like where you found him.
I was in a prison called Lee Arundel State Prison. It's called Alto. It was one of the most dangerous prisons in Georgia, where they sent a lot of juveniles there. A lot of things happened. Even when I was in prison, a guy that I knew on the 17-year-old range got murdered when I was in prison. Somebody was trying to rape him. They ended up breaking his neck. And, people was dying, different things. People was getting raped, beat, stabbed, getting their heads busted open and all of that. So when this guy died, they started moving all the juveniles out of the prison and shipping them on to other prisons because they was trying to transition, close the prison down because of that. Yeah. I don't know if they got sued or whatever, but because of that incident, they started to close the prison down, and they was trying to transition and turn it to a women's prison and get all the males out and just split everybody up. Because they thought that it was the older people preying on the younger, but really it was the younger people that was doing that. People that been there a few years, and when new people come in, it's like a cycle. They treat people how they was treated when they came in. So if they came in and people would bother them or try to rape them or try to be sexual, anything like that, after that, when new people would come in, they would turn around and do that to new people, and it continued to go on. But they ended up moving me to a prison called Hancock State Prison in Sparta, Georgia. And there, that's when I got introduced to God. I had an encounter with God, and God showed me that he was real in the midst of a church service that I had went to. And it was so authentic, I couldn't get up and walk away from that acting like, it didn't just happen, because God grabbed me. He grabbed me by my shirt and told me some things, about 3 main things he told me that always stuck with me. He told me that I wasn't a Christian, and he told me that I needed to be saved, and he told me that only Jesus could save me, no one else. And so I submitted to that, in that moment. I asked God to come into my heart, left that change. It was real, quick, simple. Went to my dormitory, started tearing up all my raps that I had wrote, and God instantly started teaching me right from wrong, and in many ways showing me that he was real from that point,
How much time do you have left in your sentence at this point?
This was in February 2005. I came home in June 2005, so about 4 months or so.
Yeah. Talk about being released. You said that you had been so used to being told what to do,
right.
No freedom at all, that you get to the door,
yeah,
and they say you can go. Yeah,
they opened the gate, told me I can leave, and I just stood there, waiting on them. No, I stood at the gate. They opened the gate, and I just stood there until they told me to leave, because I just didn't want to move without being told to move. I had been told for 3 years when to eat, when to go to sleep, when to get up, when to move, all this stuff. So I guess my mind had become institutionalized to that degree that I wouldn't move without being told to.
Yeah. If you're listening to this story, we're flying through a life. like we were blazing through a life with a mom and a dad and a lot of brokenness in your family and you on the streets and nights where you said you just kept taking as much rope as you could get and you'd end up spending the whole night out.
Right.
Now you're in jail 3 years, institutionalized. One of the things that hit me is how do you remain hopeful? How do you remain not so cynical? How do you not, out of that institutional, recidivism, just go right back out and right back in? You were on parole, and they told you to go get a job.
Right.
And you were given the opportunity, and this is for people who are listening, I want to ground us in how many moments, whatever side of the story we're sitting on, some employer gave you a chance.
Right.
You were fresh out of jail, fresh out of prison, you've got an ankle monitor on, and somebody risked it and gave you a job.
Right.
How big of a deal was that?
It was a big deal to me. My first job working at Crystal's, flipping burgers and stuff. And it was fun, but it was real genuine. This lady, I spoke to, that would give me an opportunity, even with the monitor on, that would trust me that I would do the right thing, because normally they probably wouldn't hire somebody that had a background or whatnot. And I had got so conditioned, even moving forward with life, that I would only go to certain places and apply, that places I felt like they would accept me versus just go anywhere and just trust God. And, I got to that point where I started just going anywhere and trusting God, started getting better jobs, even with a record, and better jobs, even with a record, where they would look up my record and they wouldn't see anything, or they would just see that I was arrested and I got a chance to explain, and I try to always be truthful with that instead of just not hiding that. I would tell people, or whatnot, and people would give me opportunity and chances, to work.
It's remarkable to me that you said yes, and I'm sure it wasn't easy on the ego to be in a burger joint and your friends are out doing whatever they're doing and you could make more money going back and selling drugs and doing all of that. But instead you chose to be faithful and just walk it out, and that is remarkable to me. At what point did you start to have an imagination to go back into corrections, but this time not as as somebody who's being incarcerated, but this is the huge part of the story. What happened for me is we met at an art studio in Macon. We just bumped into each other, and I heard your story. Right. And then Jerome and I got to hang out with you, and we were like, this guy there is a light to you, there is a hope to you that was contagious. And so we stayed connected through social media, and all of a sudden I see his Facebook feed, and it shows that he is in an academy, in a correctional facility academy, to be an officer in the facility. And then I saw the post when you graduated, and you said, I'm going back to the place that I was incarcerated in.
Right.
When did you get an imagination that might be something that you wanted to do?
I got it 2017, 2018. I was working at a group home with kids that the juvenile jail would send as a halfway house. They would come there, and I just fell in love with high-risk youth, that was, I consider just like me, the bad kids. Those was the ones I wanted to be around. Even at the facility I work on the worst unit that we have, and a lot of people don't want to work over there, but I love working with them. I love being around them. And so the place closed down, and I said, I want to continue in this field of work. So I put two options on the table. I said I want to either be a social worker for defects, or I wanted to be a juvenile probation officer. And I started going to criminal justice school, and then I just leaned on the side of being a juvenile probation officer. But first step, I had to go and apply. And since I didn't have my degree yet, they said if I would get some experience working as an officer, that I could transition. So I applied for the officer position and got hired. And then I went on to training, and a part of training was they had to submit my background, And I had got real cool with my director that he told me if my background didn't go through and they couldn't certify me to be an officer, that he would make sure that I could get a job doing something that was non-security, but I would still be able to work there. And they submitted all my stuff, and nothing came up. Nothing came up. I didn't have no record, and they approved me, and I was able to be an officer. And after that, when I posted that feed, it went viral on Facebook, over 5,000 likes, 1,200 shares. It got to the commissioner, and they redid my background to make sure,
We make the right choice.
Slip through the cracks. And it was told to me that my record was sealed, that no one could view it, only the FBI, and they had to have a reason to view it, so it was nothing they could do about it.
If we are on a race, I'm like cheering and yelling and screaming. Like your story, the fact that you didn't, it's just amazing to me. And this is not like an hour and a half of deciding to do the right thing. This is day in, day out in the same neighborhoods, in the same city where your an old life is right there.
Right.
Every single step of the way. And somehow he's just like this. It's amazing to me. So I'm cheering you on and cheering you on. Teach us really quick before I get the time card comes up. But you said something, you said bad kids, bad kids like me. Like I wanted to be right there with them. There's a stigma, that that I may not know you and I may not give you enough time to get to know you. Right. So I may say, well, he's one of the bad kids.
Right.
Teach us something about bad kids. What do we need to know? What do we need to remember from your time loving people and serving people who have stories themselves? As a guy who has a story himself, what can you teach all of us who are listening about loving and maybe having a more hopeful view of people?
Yeah. Well, basically understanding that nobody's too far from God. Scripture says that the prostitutes, tax collectors, Jesus made mention that they would probably get into the kingdom quicker than the ones that was chosen, because the ones that were chosen rejected, and the ones that was the bad, they received. So, in understanding that, you understand that a lot of these kids that come from where I come from, that are looked down on, Jesus is the one that's for them, the most. Scripture says that he came not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. He came for them. He came to seek and save that which was lost. And you have to be very hopeful in that aspect of those kind of kids and not give up on them, because you never know your influence and how they could turn out. And these will be some of the bravest, boldest ones for Christ once, introduced to that environment, and understanding that they're only pretty much product of their environment. They living out where they come from. And in, my neighborhood, in my city, I'm dealing with the kids that come from my city. And they glorify, drug selling and killing and robbing and all these things. But they're only dishing out what they know, what they've been taught. And until they're taught something different, they won't have a different perspective on it.
What's the most powerful thing that somebody did for you? Something that you go, I'll never forget it. Where they gave me a chance, where they said something to me that still sticks to this day?
I probably had to take more thought into thinking about it.
Yeah. I'll let you chew on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it's amazing to me how, again, we're blazing through one life. But I hope what you're picking up, if you're listening right now, I hope what you're picking up is that every one of us has a story. Scripture says no one is righteous, no, not one. Every single one of us has a story. There's a reality to our story. And so that is just good for us to remember. Remember who you're talking to, that the people on the other side of a conversation from you, sometimes we can't imagine how someone would be doing the things they're doing.
Right.
And yet if we were in their shoes, we might not imagine any other thing to do than what it was that night, committing a robbery. That seemed like what you had to do. And I think that's an important thing to remember. I'm blown away by your courage and by that lightness of your being. And I'm excited to see what comes next. I don't think it's always going to be corrections, maybe it'll be a
Right.
part of that. You want to go on to actually be a parole officer?
Yeah,
And the
probation
heart
officer.
there is that you can actually be more one-on-one and mentoring
Right.
young people?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to stay in Georgia? You want to stay in Pleasant Hill and
No.
serve there?
Nah, I just want to do it as long as I'm around. But I would like to move out, away,
Yeah.
somewhere, anywhere.
Tampa, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what God
Fish on, yeah.
may send me, but while I'm in that area,
Yeah.
Pleasant Hill is my home. I love it. I feel safe there. Even in the midst of all of what's going on, I would rather be there, than anywhere else in the world. But because of my responsibilities and things like that, and my children and stuff, that I wouldn't want them to be raised in that environment. But outside of them, I would stay in that environment because I believe that I could. I have something to offer to those people, and I have built a reputation around that of my change and evidence and my representation of Christ in the midst of a lot of people around there that still, on the corner selling drugs and still affiliated with that kind of stuff.
Did you ever feel like you were too far gone? You mentioned that, like just that sometimes we just feel like
Oh yeah,
there's not enough, I've done too much.
yeah,
This will never get straightened out. Did you ever feel like that?
yeah. I have. Even as a believer, I felt like that. In life, you make maybe poor choices, bad decisions. Feel like that, and people can handle you, treat you like that, and then you have some glimpse of hope, somebody that come and tell you that it's not over and God ain't done with you. And I choose to believe in that more than believe in the voices of others that make me feel like God has walked away. And being consistent with the character of God, I know that he's not done.
Yeah. I don't think so.
Right.
Sometimes I'm having conversations with people and I'm like, this guy might be the president. I don't know. Like, I just have a sense that there's more to the story. So be encouraged. And I hope that leaving Tampa and going back to Georgia, you are encouraged. Because even just your willingness to be honest about what it is to be 13 and 14 and make mistakes, we need to have this conversation because it affects, if nothing else, we may not live in a neighborhood like that, but I'm telling you what, you vote, and we vote for people and policies and things like that. We advance things that sometimes we do not think about places like Pleasant Hill or places even like North Tampa that are in desperate need of more opportunity, more hope. We've got people who are here that are in churches in North Tampa and things like that, neighborhoods that desperately need hope. And that's something that we can just go out of here tonight thinking about. Like, do not rush. None of us, let's not rush to the places of influence that we do have without being thoughtful that there's somebody like Michael out there that is in desperate need of help and hope. And maybe it's nothing but just your mom sticking with you and believing.
Yeah.
So.
One thing that really stood out to me, the biggest thing, you asked that question, it wasn't necessarily what somebody said, it was what somebody did, which is giving me hope and giving me drive. The minister that came in and preached the service I got saved, that took time out of their busy schedule to come into a prison and speak to inmates, not knowing that one would get saved, and for me to go and turn around and do the work that God has allowed me to do for him. You never expect that to come out of that, so you never know. So in effort to going out doing your ministry, you don't know who will hear you, who will be turned around, who will be saved, and how they will go on to do maybe greater works than you. The minister, I don't even remember the name. I didn't even tell him I got saved that night, but I left there changed, That
is evident from your book and from your life. The book is From a Convict to a Convert. You can get it on Amazon, and it is an honest story from a guy who walked every bit of that. And so you did a phenomenal job giving us a snapshot tonight, but go get the book off of Amazon and just read it, pass it to a friend or maybe a young person, drop them off to a YMCA or Urban Young Life. If you have these places, these venues, like pass this stuff on, and we'll keep sharing the story.
Yeah.
You're not done. You're writing music.
Yes.
And this idea of God going after the one, you always kind of identified with that one, and
Right.
you were the one out here and needing somebody to come after you.
Right.
And you wrote you're doing an EP that comes out in July?
Yes.
Okay.
5-song EP called I Was Always the One. And
Yeah.
it talks about the story of when Christ left the 99 sheep, go find that one that was lost, you know. And we're not talking about someone that was just out there without Christ. We're talking about somebody that was in the fold and walked away.
Yeah.
And he had to come and gather and bring back. And, you know.
You want to do it live?
Yeah,
Would you do it?
I would like to do
We
it.
don't have, I offered to make a beat for him, but some reason he was like, no, I'm good. I'll just do it
Yeah.
a cappella.
Without a beat.
So, one last chance. I mean, that's fine. Okay.
I'll do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna have some help with the hook.
Yeah. You gonna sub one?
Well,
All right. So I'll let you do the introduction.
just on the
Hey,
hook
now
part.
it's happening, so you gotta.
Yeah, just on the hook portion. It's a song called The One. And it's gonna be like the single on the CD. And so I'm gonna do it a cappella. But it's like, I woke up this morning with you on my mind. Dropped to my knees and prayed. I know it's been a long time. I don't even know where to start. Father, I've been in the dark. But I can hide from you no longer. You are still my God. And regardless of how far I walk away, never give up on me, God. This is where I pray. Never leave me lonely, God. I want you to stay. Although lately I've been running from you, scared to show my face. 'Cause I've been doing things I know you're not proud of. I have fallen, Lord. Please come pick your child up. Work in me both to will and to do of your good pleasure so I can please you. I was living in darkness. I was hiding from the sun. I knew I was beyond the place of no return. But God, you left the 99 to come find the one. God, you left the 99 to come find the one. I turned my back on you and from your presence I did run. Will I really be forgiven for everything that I've done? God, I left the 99 to come find the one. Amen. God, you left the 99 to come find the one. Although I preach and I rap, I was always that sheep that would get off the path, and you would have to come find me and bring me back and restore me again, putting me back on track. I was doing what I wanted to do. I heard you calling me, but I continued running from you. But I can no longer run. You are wherever I go. You won't let me get away. I know. I've been doing things I know you're not proud of. I have fallen, Lord. Please come pick your child up. Leave the 99 and come get the one. You my father, I'm your son till I'm done. I was living in darkness, I was hiding from the sun. I knew I was beyond the place of no return. But God, you left the 99 to come find the one. God, you left the 99 to come find the one. I turned my back on you and from your presence I did run. Will I really be forgiven for everything that I've done? God, you left the 99 to come find the one. God, you left the 99 to come find the one. I was always the one. That's it. Thank you.